So I just saw A Different Man starring Sebastian Stan, and I have some thoughts about it, so let's get into it. So this film dives into many different genres, but it is primarily seen as a thriller that has a commentary on male beauty standards. Sebastian Stan's character has a disfigurement in his face, and it is something that while he has gotten used to living with this condition, it doesn't give him a lot of confidence as a person. This character is very reserved and doesn't really want to be touched or looked at for too long. He's very self-conscious. And then as the film progresses, he makes some changes where he becomes someone who looks exactly like Sebastian Stan. And because of that, he leads a completely different life. I think this film was really interesting for what it was. The commentary on male beauty standards and the way that this character acts as the film progresses was very fascinating to me, especially when Adam Pearson gets introduced, who is a phenomenal actor. The last thing I've seen him in was Under the Skin, and he's really excellent in this. As Sebastian Stan, it gets confronted by his past in a way, except this is a person who is blossoming, who is confident, is able to excel in life despite the challenges that he may have faced with this disfigurement. It isn't even seen as a challenge. It goes against that notion. And I really like that commentary where one figure is held down by this and has let it dictate his entire life versus someone who it isn't even a factor at all. And that dichotomy between these two characters was the most interesting element about this movie, and seeing how one just continues to thrive and one is still burdened by the past of having that disfigurement and how it has stained his entire life. It's something that he cannot let go. He's always insecure. And I just thought that was a really great way of reflecting on these characters and who they are. I think Sebastian Stan is phenomenal in this film. He's had a great run. The Apprentice, which I saw yesterday, was an amazing performance as well. And then this, it's amazing for so many different reasons. This is a much more nuanced performance where he's communicating a lot through just a facial expression. You can tell every thought that is going through his head because he conveys it so well through the performance. And Adam Pearson, I thought, was excellent as well. You also have Renate Reinsve, who I think is so great at playing this very ignorant figure who is taking a hold of Sebastian Stan's life, both when he had the disfigurement and when he doesn't. And I think that all of these elements surrounding these characters was so strong, and I deeply appreciated the complexity of the film and what it was going for. Once again, discussing male beauty standards and talking about how that is such a superficial element to someone as a person. There's so much more personality, and those are the things that matter rather than just how you look. Yes, it may change someone's impression, but that can quickly be ignored, or people can quickly move past that, depending on the character of the person and who they are. One person has let it dictate their entire life, and then one who just goes, fuck it, I am who I am. That's not a part of me, that's not who I am. And showing that that person can thrive. I feel like this film gets stronger and stronger as it goes along. A lot of what I've described to you is basically a lot of elements that are focused on the second half of the film. In the first half of the film, you're dealing with Sebastian Stan, dealing with this disfigurement. He's basically wearing a mold that does look similar to Adam Pearson. And while that does bring another element to Sebastian Stan's performance where he's very reserved and he holds himself in and he just doesn't want to be approached or touched, to what he becomes later in the film where he slowly becomes a little bit more confident. But even though we know deep down he's still that person from the past and is quickly becoming frustrated where he's not afforded the opportunities that he thought he would be just because of how he looks. I do think the first half of the film is a little bit weaker than the second half of the movie because it does seem to gain a lot of focus in the second half, and it really builds to a fantastic conclusion that is just a great full stop on this narrative. and what it means for these characters and the overall message that it wants to achieve. In the first half, it is going into a lot of different genres. It feels like a thriller 1 minute, offbeat comedy the next, and then it goes into a slight body horror at times. And having it all over the place like that, it was hard to get a grip on this movie, and not in a way that made it engaging or fascinating. I was getting a little bit frustrated as it wasn't picking a focus, a central focus of the narrative until we get, about halfway into it. And that is where it drew me in. And while both halves do feel slightly different in a narrative sense, they do play an equal important job of communicating a lot about this character and the way that he has evolved and changed, and the way that these relationships have evolved and changed. There is a lot to be explored in both sides of this narrative. And while I do think that first half is good, as I mentioned, it is a little bit weaker than the first half just because it can't find its footing, both stylistically and tonally, where it just is going in all these different directions. And while I can appreciate all of these things on an individual standpoint, when you put it together, it just doesn't come together quite the way I wanted it to. Overall, A Different Man is a solid movie that I quite enjoyed, especially as it was building and going into some great places that challenged these actors and gave them a lot to work with. That trio of Sebastian Stan, Adam Pearson, and Renate Reinsver do a phenomenal job together, bouncing off each other, really committing to this incredibly unique screenplay that has a lot to say. I like the ideas being presented here, and I do like a lot of Adam Schimberg's direction. It just doesn't always come together quite the way I would like. It does tonally feel a little all over the place, and sometimes that pacing is not always as tight as it could be. But it is a good movie, and as a score, I'm going to give A Different Man a 4 out of 5. Because it is solid, it is worth your time, and it has a lot to say. Presenting a unique narrative like this, it just keeps you asking questions, and that is all you can ask for a film that is trying to get these kinds of reactions out of you, where you're thinking about it, where it's a lot more cerebral. That is fantastic, and this is a good example of a film that can do all of those things. And those are my thoughts towards A Different Man. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And also, I'd really like to hear which Sebastian Stan performance that you enjoyed more this year. Was it his one in The Apprentice or the one in A Different Man? As I said, both excellent performance in very different ways. I think he has done a fantastic job this year. He has owned 2024 with these two completely unique and different performances that ask a lot of him, once again, in completely different ways, and he is able to deliver both times. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.